Okay, so we're talking about semifinals today, and we're just going to go event by event
Sure.
and yeah, share our thoughts on this. And yeah, there will be some critique, but not a ton of critique, but just from the organizer's perspective.
Yeah, there's
And yeah, mostly just sharing thoughts
there's
on
an
what the events
there's
are.
enough podcasts for that. People who are critical of it, I'm not gonna throw another log on that fire.
Hmm.
And I happen to think they're pretty decent tests. You want to start with the first one?
Yeah, we'll just go 1 through 7.
Okay. Well, the first one is a succession of echo bike, hand over hand pull, then the assault air runner, repeat the pull, and then the ski erg and repeat the pull. So it's basically pulling 225-pound object while you're tired. I actually like this. I like any test where they sort of pre-fatigue you. Not because they're fun to do, they're horrific to do, but because that's kind of what CrossFit is. It's like the go back to the old, unroll the scroll, or what did it say? Like be fit while you're tired. And like anybody can lift heavy weight. Can you do it when you're tired? And this is a great test of that. And they're doing, a little bit on the bike, a little bit on the air runner, a little bit on the ski erg. It could be argued by some that that's excessive complexity, just make it all bike or all running or all this. But I'd also rather see it be actual running on the floor.
Hmm.
And that's the theme I'll repeat several times. But I like this. It's like, hey, hand over hand pulling is hard, grip intensive, back intensive. You have to use most of your body to really pull, effectively
Hmm.
225 pounds. An
Yeah.
84-foot pull, I believe is what it is. That's far. Like think of like unrolling a hose when you like do something in the backyard, right? Now put 225 pounds on it. It takes a while. And they have to do it a couple times. I think this is a cool test.
I do too. I can talk a little bit about why I think that. I agree that having 3 different machines it's like, okay, why don't we just have running and pulling? I
Mm-hmm.
think part of that is because you would have to have 3 rows of assault runners.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I
yeah.
also understand why they're doing it on machines as opposed to running on land, because you have a bunch of different locations and you have to standardize it because they're
Sure.
awarding a certain number of spots to each semifinal based upon the performance of the field. So if they have different running routes and leaving that up to the organizers, there
You
would
didn't
be
you didn't tell me you
inevitable
were going to use
variations in
logic today. Yeah, you didn't tell me there would be logical arguments.
that. Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah,
at the
you're right.
games, I think they would absolutely do running, but
Yeah, because there's one
because
course, one
they're
event. Yeah.
standardizing the events
No, you're
and
right. You're
doing
right.
that whole thing this year. So
That makes perfect sense.
so it makes sense why they're doing that. But it is not great for the spectators to, watch people on machines for 30 minutes. The polling will be cool though. So I think
Yeah.
they kind of want to give the crowd something to watch, and seeing the progress of the sled is super objective. Like you
Yeah.
can see where the sled is relative to the other athletes. So that'll be cool. And the reason I like this, the hand over hand sled pull, is there's no dynamic concentric or dynamic eccentric component.
That's right.
And so it's
Yep.
all concentric work. And that's
Yep.
like really, I know you don't like this word, but it's really functional. Because whenever you perform work, this is kind of getting into the evolutionary history a little bit. It's concentric. It's
Yeah,
not,
yeah.
it's not
No,
a,
that's
it's not a
true.
squat snatch. So
That's
so
true.
I really
Yeah.
like that. And if it were all running and pulling something hand over hand, then it almost has this like, hand to hand combat sort of, component to it. It's really cool. So
Yeah, this is a good one.
yeah, and 30 minutes is really, really long. So I
Yes.
mean 2K assault run that will take gosh, what did that take?
A
Less than
little over a
15
mile,
minutes.
probably like 7 minutes.
7. Okay, yeah. I was, yeah, no, a
Could be a
5K, you're
little
right. So
faster, but
it's going to be a
not
little
much.
slower than on land.
Yeah.
And it's less than half of a 5K, which yeah would put you, but you have the bike beforehand, so
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I think you're right. Like Probably like 7, 8 minutes. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I think that's probably spot on. Anyways, yeah, it'll be really long. So it kind of is the only really long one.
Yep. Yep.
So there are like three of them that are less than 6 minutes. They're like really
Right.
short. So
Right.
we'll get to those.
Right.
So I like that there is something really long. And I also enjoy when there are two opposite ends of the power endure
Totally.
spectrum
Totally.
in one
Yes.
event. So like the run, rope climb, squat snatch from the
Right.
2019 games, the first cut.
Right.
Like that was awesome.
Or at the
'Cause you
games last
have
year, the
these,
running and the jerks.
yeah, running in jerks.
That
Well,
was fantastic.
that was cool. I
I
didn't
like.
like that it was scored as two events.
Mhm.
Um, so
Oh
we'll get
yeah.
to that because
Yeah.
there's another immediate subsequent
Yep.
event in
Yep.
this
Yep.
series of
Yep.
events.
Yep.
So
Yep. Yep.
I'm not crazy about that for a few reasons, but yeah, having the running and the jerks, but they scored the run as its own thing. So Uldis
Yeah.
just like took off and won
Right.
and like won $5,000 and just like
And just looked
didn't
at
do
the
any
barbell.
jerks
Right.
and was
Right.
totally fine with that. So yeah, I mean, so you kind of have to like you could the argument is, oh well, you can strategize because they announced it beforehand.
Right.
It's like, yeah, you can strategize, but if Uldis just takes off,
Right.
there's more points at the very top of the leaderboard.
That's right.
And the difference between first and second is not the same as the difference between 39th and 40th. So you have to then gauge
Yeah.
your effort based upon what the other guys are doing, and then you have multiple heats. And so I think Uldis was in the first heat
Yeah.
that when
Yep.
we watched that. So
Yep.
because yeah, we watched it in the stadium. So yeah, anyways, there was there are issues with that. So and when you see it in person and like actually watch what's happening and how the athletes approach it, then those kind of become apparent. But anyways,
And I can tell you, as a very okay competitive CrossFitter at some point in my life, strategizing doesn't really matter. Like, oh, I'm going to strategize for the workout. Like, you can either snatch 225 for reps or you can't. You know what I mean? Like, it's good strategy you got there, but Dmitry Klokov just did 41 reps. Like, it doesn't really matter what your strategy is. So I agree with you, and I think those are really good points.
in that event, the jerks were so heavy. There were 300-pound jerks for the guys, and I
300.
think 200 for the women.
Yep.
So they were really, really heavy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Haley took the same approach. She ran really, really fast, and I think she won the running portion or came close to it.
Yeah, I think she did win it, but struggled with the jerks. And like, man, I don't want to get too far afield, but like putting weight, like you run, and then your core gets fatigued at night. It's really something. That's why it's at the games, though. Like, we got to find, who the fittest people are. Like, we're gonna make you lift this heavy ass weight. So, yeah.
And what was cool about that one too, we'll get back to the actual semis because we did go over every single games event for the individuals, but
yeah,
probably no one had practiced that.
Oh, no chance. No
doing
chance.
hard
No chance.
800-meter repeats and then
no chance. Yeah.
heavy jerks from blocks.
Yeah.
Like whenever you do heavy jerks, you're kind of like,
yeah,
maybe you do some double unders before, like, but
yeah.
But yeah, that was something that probably no one had practiced. Anyways, okay. So we're back to semifinals.
Yeah. Okay, semifinals 2.
Semifinals 2. You want to recap this one?
I will recap it. Before I tell you how I feel about it. This one is as many reps as possible in 3 minutes of 5 ring complexes. A ring complex is 1 toe to ring, 1 muscle up, and 1 ring dip. And then 20 single leg squats, max burpees over the box. So basically in 3 minutes, do your little ring complex, toe to ring, muscle up, ring dip, 20 pistols, and then max burpees over the box. And there'll be 3 rounds of this. 3 rounds of 3 minutes, 1 minute rest in between. And here's the kicker. Men and women will be wearing a rucksack, 20 pounds for the men, 10 for the women. And the box jumps are 30 inches for the men, 24 for the women. So you got your little ring complex, your pistols, burpees over the box while wearing a ruck. I'm going to just keep talking now. I think this is an awful event. Number one, ring complex is just grid. That's grid, right? And grid didn't really work, and it wasn't popular. And it wasn't popular because for many reasons, but including stuff like this. And then secondly, I'm just not wild about putting rucksacks on athletes while they do gymnastics. I just don't think it's a good idea. And I don't think it's a good idea because I've tried it. Because back when I started CrossFit in 1493, there was no like logic around training. It was like, hey, both CompTrain and Invictus published workouts today. Let's do both of them. And then it's like, you know what's better than ring muscle ups? Muscle ups with a weight vest on. And then you find that it throws your movement all completely off. And your swing is different because you're just a giant pendulum.
Mm-hmm.
So your swing is different. So the movement is different. So in my case, again, very okay CrossFitter, your risk of injury goes up. Well, guess what? Like a rucksack is going to have the same effect. Now, I'm not going to go all the way to like, this is unsafe. It's only 20 pounds. But I just don't see the fitness test here. That's all. And in 3 minutes, it's just going to be people going really, really fast with a rucksack on. I'm not wild about this.
Yeah, I totally agree. So there have been a couple of other competitions that have done the swinging on rings or rope climbs with a load. Like Wodapalooza did it. I think it was back in 2019. TFX has done it. So, you know, I have prescribed it for athletes who are preparing for those competitions and where they've done it in the past. And you have to have at least like some exposure. It's not like a ton of reps. It's just like, okay, you just need to kind of, you know, feel confident going into this.
Yeah.
And then obviously we've had like ruck runs and you know, if you're gonna even the ruck running, like I just wish they would make the distance really, really long. Like first thing of the games, ruck, you know, 20
miles.
kilometers, you know, where you're walking for most of it.
Right.
Because as soon as you put a pack on, the cost of every step is just like the fatigue cost is crazy high. The cost on the tissues is crazy high. So, I mean, you and I have done our fair share of ruck running, and it's just like, you know, you finish a 15-mile ruck run and you're trashed.
You're shot. Yeah.
So just make it walking and make the ruck heavy enough to where, you know, you're not, you know, vary the terrain so you can't run like uphill, you know. So anyways, lots of thoughts on the ruck and its appearance in past events. And in this one, it just missed the mark on this one. I will say, I should have said this before, but if you're an athlete and you're doing this weekend or next weekend or the following, this is probably where you should skip ahead and not listen to this part because it's, we can't withhold our criticism of this one. And you don't want to be like, well, this is stupid, you know, like you just got to do it, you know? So, but you know, it's just too off to not criticize it. It's off. There's no other way to say it. The jumping also with a rucksack on, 30-inch box. I mean, I don't know.
It's burpees over the box. So the way they do their burpee, then they jump on the box, and you never flex your knees. They stay real low, right? It's like a squat jump when they land on the box and rotate over.
Yeah.
Jump off.
Yeah.
I'm just not wild about this in any way. I don't like, okay, it's only a 20-pound ruck for the men, 10 for the women. It's nothing. Like, but it turns out nothing hitting the ground 17 times actually kind of adds up to something.
Yeah.
It's just there's a lot of rotation when you're in the box. And it's not like, oh, this is high risk. Competitive athletes are always relatively high risk. This is high risk with no obvious benefit.
Yeah, it's so contrived. That's to summarize it in a word, it's contrived.
Yep.
You're putting all these constraints and
not sure what objectives you're revealing here. I don't understand. Like, let's get really tired. I'm going to close this. Well, at least close my part of it. Let's get really tired because in CrossFit, you're always really tired. It's the sport of doing stuff while you're tired. Okay, that's cool. But now that we're really tired, let's put a ruck on your back and do ring tricks.
Yeah, let's move on.
Let's move on.
Let's move on.
I don't like that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, third one is Linda, but it's dumbbell bench presses. So it's on the heavier side. I haven't actually done the math on what this would be relative to body weight for males and females. I think, of course, it's semifinals, so it's on the heavier side. I mean, 90-pound dumbbell bench press, that's for 55 reps. I think that's where the workout is. I think that's really going to get some people.
Well,
I don't know how they're going to judge dumbbell bench press
that's where I was going with this.
up
Yep.
on, yeah. So any thoughts on that?
No, I think this is cool. It's a name workout. It's a CrossFit Classic. They've tested it at the regionals before, I believe it was. And
Yeah, it was regionals in
it became
2017 or 18.
yeah, and it was a from a fan perspective. It's not always super fun to watch, but it got interesting because it became a bench press workout. It was like,
Yeah.
hey, I got to do a set of like 6. Okay, every games athlete can do 220 for 6. I can do 220 for 6, and I'm old, right? But like, I can't do it 10, 9, 8, 7, 6 while I'm
Hmm.
tired. Like,
Hmm.
now many of these people can or could back then, but some could not. And that's where like a failure on a bench press is like a failure on a strict handstand pushup. Like, you have to shut it down for 30 seconds while your
Yeah.
competition continues to work.
Yeah.
So I think this is cool. It's a kind of, this is what CrossFit is. I do share your skepticism of judging dumbbell bench press. It's a lot of shoulder loading, but so is CrossFit generally. And this is the one which I believe won't be live streamed, sadly, because this is going to be good.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating. The other consideration is that you have to pick the dumbbells up again.
That's right. Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's a good point. You have to get on a
there's no
rack.
rack there with a barbell where there's still a fatigue cost with a barbell to re-racking and unracking.
Yeah, much less though.
But because your chest and triceps are so fast twitch, your
Yeah.
punching muscles are so fast
Right.
twitch, you
Right.
probably want to re-rack it pretty often, and take shorter rests and anyways. But
Yeah, if you put the dumbbells down, you got to pick them up.
you got to pick them up, and they're 90s.
Man,
So
those
yeah, I
CrossFit
mean,
guys are so clever with their programming. No, this is cool. Seriously. This is
yeah, it'll be interesting. For me, I wouldn't go so far as to say it's cool, because I have huge questions about the judging. I have huge questions about
yes.
like
Agreed.
the fatigue cost of picking the dumbbells up again and how that will affect the athlete's strategy. And I think there's a lot more risk taking that will go into that because
Absolutely.
of that.
Yep.
Um,
Yep. Absolutely.
so yeah, it'll be
But all
interesting.
those I see all those characteristics as like that's what makes competitive athletics competitive. Like the
Mhm.
difference between competing and practice. If you're practicing dumbbell bench presses, when you get tired, you put them down, you walk around, you come back to your next set. This is like that guy didn't put them down, you know. So that's
Yeah,
that
yeah.
that this isn't the best word for it, but like that drama is what makes it consumable as a product, in my opinion. So
I do wonder if you're gonna have guys like on the bench instead of looking up at the ceiling, they're gonna be looking to their left and right.
this is a tip to the athletes: don't do that.
Yeah, no. I
Don't
think
do that.
the other consideration is that they've had a couple of weeks to practice these, so I do think
Right.
the breakup strategies are
Right.
going to be pretty dialed
Yeah.
in. So
Yeah.
they're not like announcing a day of saying we're using dumbbells instead of a
Right.
barbell, and then having
Right.
just chaos out there. So
Yeah. I
yeah.
agree. All right.
All right, number 4. So number 4 is yeah. So if you're an athlete, skip ahead. Got big questions about this one. It's an 800-meter assault air runner. So again, they're on the machine running, and then max snatch, but the time cap is 6 minutes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, is an air runner that much slower than 3 minutes for an elite athlete? I have to think it's going to be around there.
Are you making the point that everyone's going to jog and then snatch real heavy? Is that
Everyone's going to jog it. I
Yeah.
don't understand, because even if you jog it, you're going to finish around 4 minutes and you're going to have 2 minutes to lift. So, and as a
So
CrossFitter, you're going
this
to
is really
recover
just
really
the
quickly
max
from that.
snatch. This is just the max
It's just
snatch.
the max snatch. I don't. Yeah,
See,
I
you had
don't
said
know.
before something that I disagree with, but it's a I don't think there's a right answer here. The running plus jerks, you didn't love that it was 2 scores because Uldis Upniks decided that he's going to get all the run points and jerk points. He made a strategic decision because finishing near the bottom of the leaderboard was less harmful than failing to finish near the top if you're competing, right? So like the spread from 35 to 37 is much less than the spread from 1 to 3. So he went for the 100 points. I guess it was 50. He went for all the points and therefore sort of inverted the event, right? Like, but that's again where I sit. Like, that's just good strategy. Like, hey, I'm not going to jerk 300 pounds 15 times. So let me get the points I can get. I think that's cool. And I wish that this was two events, because this is testing two very distinct capacities important to fitness, like power, snatches, and capacity running. That's foundational stuff. One could argue that 800 meters doesn't test capacity, but let's have that argument after you run a hard 800. So I kind of wish it was two scores, because like you, I see a bunch of athletes running a 800 in like 3:30
Mhm.
and then snatching
And not being tired. Yeah.
and not being tired. It's
Yeah.
just a little warm up and then snatch.
Yeah. Which,
I'm
not that everything has to be pre-fatigued, just make it a
right.
snatch event.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
and you said you wish they were scoring it as two events. So they
I
have a
do.
2-minute rest
Yeah, and
after
then
this,
right.
and then there's an immediate
Yep.
subsequent event.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
the immediate subsequent event, event 5, is 8 snatches at a moderate heavy load, but
Yep.
won't
And
be a
then run.
problem. Some guys will touch and go it. It's 125 and 185,
Yeah.
and then an 800-meter run, which is going to be really fast.
Yeah.
So
So you have
uh,
two tests to get two scores. Just combine them into one test,
yeah,
because
exactly.
both of them test like this is two tests of the exact same thing. Let's make
It
it one test.
is. Yeah. Yeah. Guy is going to touch and go, and he's going to
Yeah.
have the best snatch. So
Right.
this
Well,
is
that's
another reason that, yeah, we don't love, this is like, it's resembling of the bicouplet from 2018, I think it
right.
was, where they did
Right.
a bunch of snatches and bar muscle ups, and then they did a
Yep.
bunch of snatches and chest to bar right after.
Yes.
And it was
Yes.
2 events, and it was just, it's the same thing. So why do we have
Yes.
200 points for
This
it?
should be
So
one event.
yeah, it should be one event. And yeah,
I
anyways.
think you're right. Guy's gonna win both of them, and hands down. And that really, that's not just like Guy is a freakishly talented weightlifter in the CrossFit community, because he is, and it's fun to watch him do that. But I think the general point is that no matter how you dress up a snatch test, the strongest athlete always wins.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
you could find examples of, like, I don't know, athlete so and so missed a heavy 1 rep max snatch, but like, you're not going to find a snatch test where somebody like Matt Frazier finished 31st. Like, he might not win them all. He might not have even been the strongest weightlifter, but he was always going to be near the top. No matter how you dressed it up, he was going to be in the top 5 in a snatch. Or Rich, or Guy in this case is really a good example. No
Yeah.
matter how you dress up a snatch test, he's going to win it. Like at Wadapalooza, they did all the thing with the handstand hold on the parallettes, and then the like clean complex or whatever, and Guy won it. Like, it doesn't matter. All these other things are just, you still get the strongest athlete winning.
Yeah.
So just make it a strength test.
So, yeah. I just 100% agree
Or
with
make
that.
it 2 scores. I don't know. No one at headquarters is
Yeah.
contacting me like,
Yeah.
hey, what do you think?
Yeah.
But that's what I think.
Yeah.
And they're both like, I'm gonna stay on this soapbox for another 90 seconds. Apologies in advance. The heavy snatch is going to determine the outcome in both events, right?
Yeah.
So we're doing 1 rep max snatch twice. Is that what's happening here?
Well, the run isn't long enough to make. So Guy also won the 400 meter.
But he happens
sprint.
to be a fast twitch guy. He won the sprint. These are built for him. But
yeah. So what I'm saying is, if it was a 5K run,
oh, yes,
it's a totally different event, and it has that polarization effect that we like the first one.
Yes.
But this is like the fast twitch. It's two super fast twitch events.
These are two
back
1
to
rep
back.
max snatch tests.
And when you look at all 7 events, there's the first one, which is really long, but it also has a really heavy odd object. So the fleet of foot are not necessarily going to dominate that one. It depends. Like, we have to see what the sled is like, and what the surface is like, what the friction is like, etc. That's actually another interesting point, is like, how are they going to rig the sleds, and friction of the surface, and got to standardize all that. So anyways, but yeah, so not really getting what they were after with this.
They're
I mean,
they're
if you just want to
testing
have two events that are really powerful and like, okay, but you got to show me like how that is diverse enough over the course of all 7 events.
yes,
And for me, the next longest one after the 30-minute one, which also has the strongman component, is Linda, which is all
Linda, right,
resistance. So
right.
I'm not seeing the really aerobic component.
I just have to say this again in case it wasn't clear. They're testing 1 rep max snatch twice. These are back-to-back 1 rep max snatches. That's all this is.
Yeah.
It's that because that second run is so short.
It's so short and
The
everybody's
athlete who
fast
can do-
twitch and is just gonna hammer it.
Yes.
So yeah.
The athlete who can do all the reps at 185 for the men, what is it, 135 for women? But it's the same phenomenon. The athlete who can do 185 the fastest will also be the strongest athlete.
Yeah.
That's how that works.
And we'll also run a fast 800. So,
and because it's a short distance, yes.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that was your point. If it was 5K, different capacities would emerge.
Mhm.
You get the Haley Adams effect. She's not competing this year, but she's well known. She probably wouldn't be the first one to finish all the snatches. But in a 5K run, she would blaze by anybody.
Yeah. She would catch
So-
people on the 5K. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. So that won't happen here. So I think we're going to see the strongest snatchers win 2 events. So, okay, good for them. Being, very strong is awesome. Something I continue to aspire to, maybe not reach, but aspire to. But it's not, if you're testing broad general fitness, they're not doing it here.
Yeah.
In these 2 events.
Yeah.
And that's that.
Yeah. All right. So number 6 is a chipper of sorts. It's very gymnastic. It's 20 overhead squats at the same moderate heavy load.
Yep.
That they snatched in the previous event. 500-meter row, which is inconsequential, and then 3 handstand walk pirouettes. So very high skill, but the people who were at the game saw that.
Yep.
2 seated legless rope climbs, 20 strict chest to wall handstand push-ups. So that set size has emerged again. You have to do 20 of those. It's very dense. 2 seated legless rope climbs, 3 handstand walk pirouettes, 500-meter row, 20 overhead squats. So chipper and really, really dense. So and very gymnastically challenging with the high skill component of the pirouettes.
So there was another podcast. I don't talk about other people's podcasts where they were reviewing these workouts, and the commentator said, the pirouette handstand walk thing just isn't that hard. And he got up from his chair and did 3 of them. And I tend to agree with that. That said, I like this workout. And I think people who do CrossFit or who listen to this podcast understand that 20 overhead squats at 185 or 125 is a lot. A 185 overhead squat doesn't seem like much if you're a competitive athlete. You snatch 185 pretty easily. 20 overhead squats at 185 is a lot. And that second set of overhead squats on the way out, because you start with 20, you end with 20. That's hard.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know if 125 is equally hard for the women. I don't know. Never done that. But 185 for 20, that's work. And yes, I know like these guys will, overhead squat high into the 300s. Okay, 20 times. This is like a shoulder destroying workout. So that second set of 20 overhead squats is going to be really unpleasant. And I think places in the field will change order on that last set of the last 20. I think the person who's the event leader coming into that last 20, unless it's like a Justin Medeiros type who's probably going to win many of these events, the event leader will change, or the places will change on that last 20. And you see a lot of like sad faces and exasperation in that last 20. And that's what competitive athletics is. So I'm a pretty big fan of this. We could go event by event, but it's all CrossFit stuff. I mean, the seated legless rope climb, okay, that's cool. Like that's, how many times have we seen athletes struggle on legless rope climbs in high stakes events? Often. That means it's a good test. It's, it's not contrived. It's not ruck, like put a ruck on and put your toes on the rings. This is Climbing a rope is like, that's gym class stuff from the 50s, that's great.
Yeah.
So I tend to like this 15 minutes. I don't know. People will finish it. Some people won't.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a ton of separation at all sorts of different places in
Yeah,
this
me too.
workout. There's going to
Me
be
too.
separation on the pirouettes. There's going to be separation on the
Plus,
climbs. There's going to be separation on the, so there's going to be wildly different
yeah.
scores.
Oh, yeah.
And there's something to point out there, the tests that we just went through are going to be just a really close race.
Mhm.
And there's the excitement factor of that. It can be good for the sport. It can be good for spectating. But when you said something where that makes it a good test, separation makes it a good test. And I think it's important to like pause on that because the sport needs both, I think. You need stuff where, hey, this is a great test. We got a ton of separation and we have a clear fitter person. But then you also need stuff for the spectators who
Agreed.
don't really know what's going on. And if it's all a ton of separation, then they're just
Right. Why are
hard
the
to
athletes
watch
all over the floor?
for someone who isn't familiar with what's going on. So yeah, so I think that's an important like just thing to pause on just for a moment. The seated, it's something new, but for me, it is a little bit, it's a constraint, there's something beautiful about just get to the top of the rope, touch this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also with the legless, like even saying you have to do it legless, this is getting into really finer details, and we may disagree on this, but even saying you have to do it legless is a constraint.
It is.
Right? You get what I'm saying? Like if there's enough rope climbs, you make it simple enough. There are all sorts of things with the descent of a legless rope climb. So do you have to touch? Do you have to show control? When can you clamp? There's all sorts of things that make it really difficult to judge. The athlete's 15 feet away from you. So whereas if you just say, look, you're on the ground, you have to touch up there. There's a rope there. It's a lot less constrained. So those are some like of my little finer criticisms. But I think it makes the sport better.
No, I feel like I come in the middle of this, in that I totally agree that the seated aspect is like it's theater in a way.
Why do I have to sit down?
But
I have to get up there, right?
Yeah, no, I understand that. The thing I might not fully agree with you on is that a traditional like rope climb, any way you want. It's a CrossFit semifinal. Everyone can do that 100 times. So you need like seriously, and I don't mean this as a joke, but if you put a 200-foot rope outside my house and let me climb it with my feet, I could climb that. I can just keep going because you put your feet there, you're over the rope, you rest. So doing that faster is a bit of but when it's 15 feet, is it 2 pulls or 3? I kind of like the legless aspect, although I guess you could say we already did upper body pulling in the first event. Right? Like, we already tested that. And then hand over hand pulls on the sled. That's a not completely a legless pull, but it's mostly an upper body pull. So we're testing that again. You could make that argument, and the seated stuff is like, hey, we're all going to be the same height now. So if you're 6'2", the legless rope climb's a shorter climb than if you're 5'2". It just is. That's just, is the height is fixed. So this is kind of taking that away. I don't think that's necessarily a great argument for it, but that does happen. So I see what you're saying about like, hey, you're at the bottom, get to the top. Cool. But I've also seen the legless rope climbs. You're right about the judgment thing, but I've seen it just wreck people who seem to be exceptionally fit. And this is a semifinal. You have to go through to the games. That's what's supposed to happen. If there's a test you can't do, you shouldn't be in the games. And I think this will find some of that. So I see where you're going with the seated being a little contrived, although I won't go all the way to legless is contrived, because I've just seen it be so effective and like, oh, there's so and so, and they start doing the swing and the trying to reach up, and it's number one, it's relatively entertaining as a fan not to see them fail. That's competition, everybody fails, but like to see, like, can they squeeze out one more? Like, that's the stuff you want to watch. Like, okay, he's at the top of the rope and he's swinging. Can he find a way to get a hand up there? You know, like, I think it's kind of cool. And the legless gives you that in a way that the regular rope climb will never give you. But the
Yeah,
seated,
totally.
I see what you're saying. And I just like the fact that this is going to be a separation workout. I don't also, I'll go out there and say it. A lot of people, especially on the women's side, won't finish this. Why the women's side more than the men's side? Because they both get a 15-minute cap, and the rowing is going to be a lot slower for the ladies. So 500-meter row, if you're blazing fast, is 130. So if you're rowing like in a CrossFit competition, it's 140, 145. So that's 320, 330. Because no one's going to row 130. That would be stupid. But like people will row 140, 145. So that's 320. So now you're down to like 11. And for the women, it's 2 minutes. So they're down to 11 minutes of non-rowing.
Yeah, I think you're going to see some 145s, 150s even from the men because
Yeah,
it's
I think so
such a
too.
short distance and it's
What do
measured
we
in
always say?
meters.
You can't win a workout on the rower. You can only lose it, right? Like
Yeah.
row a 125 and see what happens the rest of the time, right? So you're going to see 145. So that's 330. So now you're down to 1130 to do all this work. 20 overhead squats takes a while.
Mm-hmm.
Handstand, what's the handstand walk pirouette? That's going to take seconds, but it's going to tire your shoulders out. 20 strict chest to like handstand push-ups facing the wall. That's going to take a while after overhead squats. Some of the guys will do it quickly, but many will not. And I think some of the women will be a little bit slower here. Upper body pressing, generally men are stronger at that. So I think you're going to have a lot of people who don't finish on both sides, but especially on the women's side, because that row is going to be 2 minutes each on the women's side. So they're going to have less than 11 minutes to do all this work.
Yeah, their cap is 16 minutes, so boss gave them an extra minute. But yeah.
Okay, there it is. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So that, but okay, so they're on an equal footing as regards the rowing, but still, I think some of the strict handstand push-ups. I think both men and women will struggle on that. And 20 overhead squats, it's a lot. It's a lot of squats.
Yeah.
And it's also like if you miss a seated legless rope climber, if you kind of poop out on the rope, like then you definitely won't finish. So whether it's contrived or not, you have to do it quickly and proficiently, or you won't finish this. And I think that's going to be there's going to be a lot of sad faces after this one.
Yeah, one other thing I want to say about this, this is not criticism, although I could, I'm not going to go back to that. So the position of the scapula when you're doing an overhead squat is this like retraction and upward rotation.
Yep.
And if it were like a parallel handstand push-up, you would be putting them in that same scapular position. Whereas with a rope climb and by switching you around and doing chest to wall, you're in this scapular protraction. So it is, and it's a lot more anterior delt. So it's not as non-complementary as if we were using like other versions of gymnastic movement. If you had like overhead squat and ring muscle up or overhead squat, and like it's not. So
no, that's true.
That's just like just a noticing that I have as a coach looking at this is, instead of doing strict handstand push-ups, if it were like 40 strict handstand push-ups regular, you're in this like really retracted position. It's like the same thing as an overhead squat. So
right.
Whereas this is like, oh no, like we're bringing the scapula into protraction, and and it's a different kind of challenge.
So anterior delt heavy too.
Yeah. It's very.
I wonder if we'll ever see the regular handstand push-up ever again in competition.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this in the quarterfinals podcast, but we like the change there.
Me too. Yeah, big fan of it.
Yeah,
and I'm a big fan of this event.
Yeah, cool. All right, last one. So number 7 is 3 rounds for time of 15 or 10 echo bike calories, 20 toes to bar, and a 60-foot sandbag bear hug carry. Sandbag is I think it's the same weight as the Husafel sandbag from the games.
200 pounds for the men, 150 for the ladies. So yeah, it's pretty close. I think that Husafel thing might have been a little lighter, but not
Yeah.
significantly.
I see cycle speed on the toes to bar here. I mean, everybody's gonna hammer the bike,
Yeah.
and the 60 feet is not that far. So
No, and
I don't know. It's not.
I don't
I see cycle speed on the toes to bar there.
I don't think in my peak CrossFit days I was as strong as a semifinalist, maybe. But 200-pound sandbag is real heavy. So I've picked up a 180-pound sandbag and carried it in competition, and it sucks, man. It sucks. And like, yeah, all right, these guys are stronger than I was, but I was pretty strong, and it's hard. That takes a lot out of you. So yes, I agree with you because 15 calories is 20 toes to bars, like, but 60-foot sandbag carry, that's a lot. And I think this will be fun to watch. This is, I think,
Mhm.
as much for the spectators as the athletes. I don't think this test is going to reveal any new issues, right? Like,
Mhm.
oh, so like, who knew? Like, Justin Medeiros can't carry a sandbag. He's not going through. That's not going to happen, right? Like, this isn't going to reveal anything different, but it should be fun to watch. And I think the sandbag is going to be very unpleasant for a lot of athletes. 200 pounds is heavy. Like, it doesn't feel heavy when you squat 225 because you're squatting it. But like, strict press it, bro. Like, oh, now it's real heavy, So and now,
Yeah,
like,
this is a race. It's a good
yeah,
race.
yeah.
Yeah. So overall, what do you think of the the complete view of the test, 1 through 7?
It's more strength and conditioning than we usually see from CrossFit. But
Tested
is it
separately.
well? It's usually
What do you
like
mean by
strength
that?
and conditioning with like a pretty heavy dose of CrossFit gymnastics. You know what I mean? Like muscle ups and things like that. There's no handstand walk, right? There isn't, is there? Um,
There's the pirouette, but no handstand
yeah, but
walk.
that's the okay. But there's that, and there's the only ring thing is with the rucksack, and it's short. It's these like 3-minute bursts, right? So you're on the rings very little.
Mhm.
Um, is there bar muscle ups? I don't recall seeing any.
No, there's no kipping.
No, there's no right. So there's none of that. There's no chest. Is there chest to bar pull ups? No.
I should caveat there's the rings. So you
Yeah,
are
there's a
swinging on
ring.
the rings.
Right. So there's a lot of strength stuff. The snatches twice talked about that. The bench press thing with the dumbbells. Like Linda is a bro workout. Seriously, like that's like an LA Fitness workout, right? I mean, it's really like I'm not just saying that because there's bench press, but it's like this huge set of like lifting over and over. It's not what we would often think of as like a mixed modality CrossFit test. Now, I'm not saying that's good or bad, but it is different from the general like display a lot of different capacities while you're tired. You don't have to display a lot of capacities in Linda. You just have to be strong. Now, that's awesome. I wish that was the case when I started CrossFit in 2010. Like, oh, it's really just barbell stuff, bro. But so there's a lot of strength here. And then the conditioning stuff, you're skiing, you're rowing, you're running in a lot of events. There's an erg or a treadmill in like half the events or a bike.
See, I almost see that 45 or 30 or 45 calories in the final event. That's strength. That
I sort of agree with you. And the sandbag will override all the other stuff. But
mhm.
even still, you have treadmill events 3 times. You have
Yeah, but that treadmill is also
800 meters is, my
it's
point is,
powerful.
I completely agree with you. But my point is that in the past, I think this much use of the ergs and the treadmills, I don't think you would have seen this much to see 4 of them in 7 events and less gymnastics than usual.
Hmm.
You don't see the bar muscle ups, very little ring muscle ups are just like, and they've like augmented, one way to say it, the the ring muscle ups with the ruck, and they've like, toast the rings. It's like that's not really. It's only this little 3-minute test. You know, it's like they finally put toast to bar in event 7. I'm not saying it's good or bad. It's very strength and conditioning ish to me.
Mm.
You don't have like the long sets of pull ups that
Mhm.
have been. You know, there were regional events where they did 100 chest to bar pull ups in a
Mhm.
row.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying that's good or bad. It was bad for me because my arms are 9 feet long, but like that's what it used to be. This isn't here. There's no bar muscle ups here. There's like
Mm.
those are staples of past regional events or sanctional or semifinal events or CrossFit generally. Walk into any box, there's people doing chest to bar pull ups, bar muscle ups. I'm not saying that cheapens the test or waters it down. I'm just saying, as an overall summary, see a lot of strength stuff, a lot of conditioning stuff, and less gymnastics. Interesting.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, it's an interesting take. Well, so you just went through every single sanctioned CrossFit event
Yeah, I
and
do.
did various data analysis inside of that.
Yeah,
And I'm sure chest to bar came up all the time.
all the time.
And in, volumes anywhere from 75 to 150
Yeah,
reps.
yeah,
So to not see that, as an advocate for the athletes, I don't think either of us mind that we're moving away from that, for all sorts of reasons, rotator cuff health.
yeah,
But yeah, we're still swinging on the rings with the rucksack on. So
yeah.
is that really?
We've
Um,
covered event 2. Yep, don't love
yeah,
it.
yeah. When I look at these events as a whole, I see a lack of an aerobic component.
Yeah.
The aerobic component does emerge when you have 7 or 8 tests.
Mhm.
I'm sort of anticipating they'll announce one more at the very end because they want to have that unknowable component. But yeah, I mean, the first one is aerobic, but then you have a really heavy odd object. So
Mhm.
yeah, I don't see a huge aerobic component to this. It seems really on the powerful end
Yeah,
of that spectrum
yeah,
to me.
I agree. Some of these are like the last one, the 60-pound, the 60-foot handbag carry, sandbag, sorry, 60-foot sandbag carry, 200 pounds. That's pure strength.
Yeah.
That's strongest athlete wins. There isn't
Hmm.
a lot of technique to carrying a sandbag. Like, it's a world's strongest man thing. You know, it's like, all right, maybe not 200 for those guys. It's probably 800, but like, it's a that's a strength test.
Hmm. Yeah.
20 overhead squats is a strength test.
Yeah.
And putting a few seated rope climbs in there doesn't change that.
Hmm. Yeah. So
Linda,
we have 2 800-meter runs,
yeah,
one of which seems pretty inconsequential.
superfluous.
We
Yeah, yeah,
have we have 500-meter rows, and we
yeah,
have 45-calorie bike. So like, yeah, there's
yeah,
ergs, but and then in the one test where there is an aerobic distance, there's a huge odd object in
yeah,
between it.
yeah.
So which we like,
No,
it's just
the only test that I give the thumbs down to is the ruck test. Do not like one thing about it. We'll not talk about it anymore except to say it stinks. But other than that, I guess the first one, this is a strength competition.
Mhm.
20
Yeah.
overhead squats, 185 is a strength thing. Both snatch events are strength things. The sandbag carry, that's strength. That's the majority of the workouts right there. That's 4 out of 7.
Hmm.
It's a strength test.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just means I came
Linda.
into this sport too early. The only thing I'm good
Yeah.
at.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, we expect the loads to get heavier as
Yep.
you ascend the
Yep.
ranks of the
Of
competition,
course.
but
Of course.
you also expect like something like the triple three,
Yes.
or a really long swim, or like a run
Yes.
swim, or
Yeah.
something that's like, okay, the
Yeah.
aerobic guys are going to do really well,
That's
and
right.
maybe they will, but
Yeah.
in the first event. But I look at it and I see measured in meters for one. So that diminishes the aerobic advantage as opposed to if it were like a huge number of calories.
Right. Right.
um and I'm not suggesting they do that. I'm just just pointing that out. So and the distances, you know, they may be long enough to where you get some separation, but I don't know. I think the strength is going to be really valued inside of that.
Yeah,
And I could be wrong. I mean, I don't know how long this hand over hand pull takes. So
right, right,
if it takes 45 seconds, then it's like, okay, well, yeah, then it's an aerobic event. But
right,
if it
right.
takes 3 minutes,
Yeah, it's
then, you know,
yeah,
yeah. So I just don't know enough about that. Um,
yeah.
anyways, yeah. Any other closing thoughts there?
No, it's gonna be fun to watch, and I think it's cool. I like the format. I like the idea of trying to return to something that's more like the old regionals with more community involvement, because I think it was really good for the sport. I think it's a step in the right direction, and hopefully it's a fun event.
Cool. See you guys in the next one.
You got it.